Welcome to the Funnel Reboot Podcast with your host, Glenn Schmeltzley. Let's get into today's show.
Hey, Glenn here. Welcome to Funnel Reboot. I hope that you've been with us before, but if you're just joining us for the first time, welcome. Let's get straight into today's show. There's something we take for granted these days, something that wasn't even possible a short while ago. We have to rewind to 2008 to see it. Let's go to the first iPhone, the 3G. Now, what you can send and receive with one, if you can afford the data plan at that time, was just voice, text, and small images. It was restricted to that because the cellular networks could only transmit at about a third of a megabyte per second. Now, that went up to 2 megabytes per second when 3G was fully available. A few years later, LTE 4G started becoming available in North America, reaching about 97% penetration by 2013. And the data speeds with those let you watch a brief standard def video. And that's why social networks like Instagram and Snapchat started letting you record and send short clips then. By the late 2010s, advanced 4G infrastructure was fast enough, from 12 to 80 megabytes per second, for people to watch 4K videos on their devices. And that brought TikTok and other platforms like it along for the ride. And now, with 5G out, lag-free, high-def video is available almost everywhere. And if you are a marketer trying to reach consumers, it means that video must now be part of the mix. There are still quirks to these platforms that we need to figure out. Us marketers might not be used to their ad units that include e-commerce options that let you sell products while the ad is right in front of a consumer. And more broad than this, it's hard to know how these platforms react to the videos you post. That's because they know so much about a user's habits, it's raised issues of privacy, like which country that data is being shared with. And clearly, this calls for us to get an expert in to help us sort this out. Our guest graduated from San Francisco State University and FIDM with a business degree and started working in-house at consumer e-commerce brands, running their digital marketing programs. And after helping brands in every category from skincare and cosmetics to books and jewelry, she built her own agency team to do this, Pennock, which is named after the rural Minnesota town where her family are from. So let's go to Northern California, where she lives with her husband Tyler and her 3 kids, to talk with Nikki Lindgren. Nikki Lindgren, welcome to Funnel Reboot.
Thank you for having me today, Glenn.
I'm very glad to. Nikki, we're going to talk about how people should be using video to advertise to their customers and prospects. And I think a lot of people start at the wrong end here, and I'm sure you've heard this. People will say something like, we need a video strategy. And I imagine when that falls on your ears, it sounds as silly as saying we need an Excel strategy or we need a memorandum taking strategy. How do you prefer people think about video instead of just saying we just have to do it for video's sake?
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because I've seen both sides of the coin play out and kind of successfully, to be honest. When brands are working with me and my team, it's usually in the context of we need to find a way to bring our acquisition costs in check. We need to find a way to get new customers at a good CPA. And so what are the different tactics by which we can deploy to do that? Given the landscape of where we are in time, many of the best performing ways in which you can get a net new audience to your funnel is through video. But we would start by looking at things in the landscape of what are the best tricks and tactics to deploy around acquisition, and then push video into the right bucket of that overarching strategy.
Great. And I know that you have a lot of experience with discretionary spending. I think luxury products, jewelry, other accessories. You would then probably want to see what offerings the client has and figure out the strategy from there. Basically work backwards from what we're trying to put into the hands of our customers, right?
Yeah, that is correct. And I think it's a good comment to reflect on for a second, because we are at this moment in time where machine-based algorithms are working a lot better in terms of audience development than most ad buyers are doing. And I'm talking about specifically like the Metas and the Googles. All of the builds are based on, machine learned audiences, let's call them. Mm-hmm. And so oftentimes more novice paid marketers might come to the fold and just say like, yes, we're going to run Performance Max and broad audiences on social platforms. But it's really important for a dedicated strategist to come in and understand the brand's personas. Even if we're not going to target that persona precisely, we need to know who they are so that we can figure out what types of assets, video or other, will speak to them, and what placements in terms of platforms are going to have the highest concentration of that type of person.
So I'm hearing it's a mixture of who they are as well as what the offering is. Can you
Correct.
give me an idea of, beyond just, straight footage, like B-roll footage of, I don't know, a direct-to-consumer product on a flat surface? There's more to it. There are, music and audio effects and captions and, visuals that bring in transitions. Do you find that those will also change depending on who we're targeting with our ads?
Yes, 100%. And I don't want this to be misconstrued as like, oh gosh, it's such a huge hill to climb to get video done correctly, therefore I should just tune out and ignore, because there's a lot of ways in which you can run lo-fi video, iPhone native type video, and be highly successful with it. Mm-hmm. That being said, with some of our more high-end discretionary spend type product mixes, we do see the elevated, more professional polished stuff work better, even on placements where lo-fi is king, like TikTok. So it's kind of, again, cycling back to, you really have to know the persona of the products and the brand to do a good job of being a media buyer for that brand.
Sure. So we're not the only ones in control of that. You brought up TikTok. So they're renowned for using their algorithm to find people who may be interested in the type of product. But I find that there's a yin and yang here, that the onus on those creating the ads, you also have to try and think of how the algorithm is going to react based on how long of an ad you make, or what you put in it, or how interesting the content is. Can you help us understand how, beyond just what those of us who use these products and we see the organic reach, how do we think about the role those algorithms play when it comes to paid reach?
Yeah, the role they play is quite large. In fact, the majority of what's going to work best on paid social right now is going to be a symptom of what is out there organically, meaning like the sparks and the boosts within the ad platform are going to predominantly work better than anything that's pushed live as like a true ad. So that's something that we have found. It's been, kind of like the last 6 to 12 months have been really focused on Spark and boosted ads. It's hard to say, at every moment in time, there's a new type of trend. We find that there's a certain time to catch on to the trend. We find after it's hit 100,000 uses, it's usually not a trend that makes sense to go after in the lane of just being a quick hit, and definitely not in the lane of being an evergreen type asset. So it's hard to speak to that a little bit deeper, because it really depends on the brand's aesthetic, the product of the brand, and blah, blah, blah. So I couldn't really get into too much related to the trends. I could we could talk about an example, but it's not a one size fits all.
Sure. Give us an example.
Yeah, so over the last couple of months, a trend that was really big was called, I think I'm pronouncing it correctly, croquette, and it was where people were putting beautiful bows on every and anything. And so an example would be like organically, people are putting bows on French fries and
Oh,
taking video of that. So we saw this trend for one of our clients who has a fragrance brand, and we, asked them to put some bows on their products in their factory or in their warehouse facility and test those out as ads. And we caught it early enough that we were able to ride that croquette wave. Had we done it a week later, could have been very different results. And it's definitely not an asset we're still running now a few months beyond the trend because it's
okay.
dated. So those are the examples of things that are happening in real time.
Sure. It sounds vaguely similar to older school techniques like writing hashtags. But here we're talking about things that would only be hinted at inside of the ad unit because it's part of the video. Is that would that be a fair comparison?
Yeah, and I think that would be a fair comparison too for even to some extent the length, the sound or the background music. All of that is going to be very similar to those kind of like quicker moving trends, similar to hashtags in the past.
Yeah, and I mean, it seems like we're butting up against a hard limit of being able to get out just the minimum information so that someone actually is given an impression by the brand. Do you have any thoughts? I mean, how low can we go here? How short can we make these?
Yeah, it's interesting that you ask because looking at all of the data we see on TikTok ads in particular, it's hard to get a new audience to engage for longer than 6 seconds, let's say. On average, it's closer to 3 seconds, and that's just industry DTC as a whole. We really sit at that 3 second mark. So we've really got to break down what's happening in those first couple seconds and what we can do to entice them to stay longer. I mean, one could say, why are you making videos even longer than that if that's all you can get a person to watch anyway? But it's like how, that's a channel where people really want to be entertained. And if you're not giving them entertaining content, that's an issue. I mean, I make videos for our TikTok, which is not a huge priority for us, but something I do fairly regular. And I tend to start my videos all very similarly, even though I know by the time I've ended my little intro, the person's already moved on. So I think it's just like part of us have to adapt and adjust and be as agile as the platform is and the users who are watching it.
Yeah, and even things like speeding up the video. There are many ways to do it, but that notion of being able to catch them in the first little bit so that they stay and perhaps get some prolonged exposure to your brand. And prolonged, we might even mean 6 or 10 seconds, but that is better. And I think it's truly something where you could say, if you're later on looking at your performance numbers, yes, we did achieve some good here because this audience, these demographics clearly hung with us for 6 to 10 seconds. It sounds like such a small victory, but I think you'd agree it's a significant one.
Right. And then from an ad strategy perspective, it is quite significant because we do get to remarket to anybody who has engaged with a certain threshold of any video. So instead of pushing people back to third-party data, which is going to your e-commerce website or third-party website, we can really start to use first-party data within a platform like TikTok and start remarketing to them there. So it is really important to get to. And I think like the more diversity one can have with the first 3 to 10 seconds of their video, the better.
All right. Since we're on TikTok, so I don't know that much about the different ad units, but it seems to me that most ads are in-feed ads. Would you be using that same unit when you're doing the retargeting ad, or are you going to flip over to some different kind of ad that maybe has higher prominence, but you have more assurance that because that person engaged before, they're probably worth it?
Yeah, so I think a marketer in-house or agency side helping a brand should be thinking through the funnel within the platform itself. So within the example of TikTok, let's just say this is a luxury product, it's high-end jewelry. awareness, first touch types of hooks, if you will,
Yep.
could be the heritage of the brand. Maybe it's still made in a small town in Italy.
Yep.
It could be talking about the quality of the gold. Like, I don't know, but there's probably a couple USPs that really hook people out of the top of funnel. So that's where I would focus the differentiation, like having 3 different lines of USPs and different varieties by which we can test them for that top of funnel hook. Middle of funnel is usually a little bit more educational. So once they've watched that first one, now let's give them a little bit more history about the business and the brand and like some education factor. And then remarketing to those people who watched the middle of the funnel assets is usually going to be like third-party credibility or testimonials or something that really proves that, hey, they aren't in alone on an island by themselves liking this brand. There is proof that beyond the brand, people do love and enjoy this product and brand.
And you say that we're supposed to do this within the platform as if the platform is our entire funnel. So going with that for a quick second here, what should we be thinking about as far as trying to set a cost per conversion, or to at least identify what a conversion might be if we have, several actions taking place on the platform? None of them would be maybe even getting to the e-commerce site.
Yeah. Well, this is going to vary a little bit depending on if someone has TikTok shops enabled with checkout
Yes.
or if they're driving people to e-com. But I think really, one of the rules out there for e-com marketing overall is set a budget that is 7 times your CAC or your CPA for the daily spend threshold, which for some people that's like super, super high and hard to fathom. But I think we've got to start with a test level that makes sense for everything. Top of funnel, we would be focused on video views. So anything we can do to ramp up video view engagement and engagement of the video asset. And then middle and bottom of funnel objectives would be related to driving people to a location, whether that be TikTok shop, e-com, and then truly bottom of funnel would be that CAC or customer acquisition cost. So it's hard. Like, I don't have a blanket number for that either. It depends on the average order value. So we've got some brands that can easily afford a CAC of $150 to even $200. We have other brands where their AOV is quite low and they really need to stay at below $20. So I think it'll vary depending on the type of business being managed.
Okay. CAC, cost of acquisition, of course. And that's really helpful to try and portray how we might be able to do this across. You brought up TikTok Shop. For those who haven't used something like that, can you just give the 411 on that?
Yeah. So TikTok Shop is similar to Meta Shops, where you're using a feed from your Shopify or whatever other e-commerce platform you're on to push all of your inventory and product details in real time to the social platform and enabling checkout on that social platform. So the organic user experience and ad experience on a platform like TikTok can push people to the commerce section, your shop within TikTok, and they don't even have to go to your website to convert. I will say a few things that are a little different about TikTok compared to like Instagram shop is most brands that are successful at TikTok shop are reconfiguring the naming convention of even like their product name and their product description to be a little bit more TikTok native. So probably kind of like younger, hipper, cooler than they might talk about themselves on their own e-commerce website. So that's just something, I don't have a ton of data around it, but I've seen firsthand that a few brands that are pivoting the way they speak to be TikTok native do see higher sell-through rates.
Yeah, I think that's just a good philosophy to take to any platform. It will have its own quirks, and you're best to use what that platform has. The audience has clearly embraced those quirks, so you don't want to have a one-size-fits-all that you shove into each of these platforms. You can try it, but you're probably not going to get the best performance.
Yep, exactly.
Cost of action bidding, that's one option. I know that you think about it with a couple of different options when it comes to bidding. Can you just give our audience any notion of what they might want to think of and what the options that they have in front of them are?
Yeah, so I would really think about a platform like TikTok in a way that's really moving people through a funnel experience on the platform. So to restate, a top of funnel should be a video engagement campaign. It can be others, but that's where we've seen the most success. Middle of funnel, after they've watched that first one, would probably be a traffic or some level of engagement type of campaign. And then bottom of funnel is where we really get a little bit more flexibility, because when we're working with conversions, we could do the default, which is like a maximize delivery play, and it doesn't take into account goals we have around CAC, or we can do cost cap that will enable us to say we always need a CPA or CAC at or below this number, and really kind of reduce the spend if we're not going to hit that. So brands that are really trying to be as efficient as possible would find better success with a cost cap than a maximum delivery option.
Okay. And so just to be clear, if we're, I don't know, paying something like a cost per view at the top of funnel, when we get to the bottom of the funnel, we're trying to use a cost per action. When we're trying to figure out, let's say, our management efficiency ratio or plain old, return on ad spend, are we modeling this and trying to imagine what the ideal prospect would do as they go through each of those campaigns? Like, we're summing up the bids that we would put to get them, and that overall number is going to come in under what our cost per acquisition is?
That's an interesting point to clarify. I do believe that we would want to be reporting CPA or CAC against campaigns that have a CAC objective. So to say, all in, I spent $100,000, but only 25% of that $25,000 was conversion campaigns. It's a little misleading to say, like, in our overall, you know what I'm saying? Like, I would break it down based on objective. That being said, we do look at MER for our clients overall. And that is typically, I've seen it in two different ways, but typically it's total e-commerce revenue divided by media spend. And so like a return on ad spend, you want it to be as high as possible. But that, gives you that steady state of, I'm always at a 7X, I'm always at a 4X. Anything in between is usually fairly normal for the businesses I work with. And then our goal is, as we increase spend and diversify our spend portfolio, can we hit, or can we sustain our MER we did the previous month, or can we actually get it better even as we do more top of funnel plays? And I think with just the cookieless future and all of the privacy changes, MER is going to have to be the way in which marketers think about performance in paid ads.
Well put. I want to get into how we do that reporting, and also the things we need to think about that translate for business users, likely, senior management that don't know these platforms very well. We need to, as marketers, provide that translation so that they can follow what we're doing. We need to be able to put it in terms they'll understand. So we'll cover that, but before we do, I want to take a quick break. Let me step away for a second to note, on social, you'll see show-related updates about our guests. You'll see what's happening behind the scenes. Or you can simply talk to me. And I've really loved how lately a few of you have posted positive comments about the show. It encourages me in making this podcast the best it can be. So find Funnel Reboot on LinkedIn or Instagram or X. Click follow and maybe say hi. Thanks a lot. Let's get back to the show. Nikki, you're used to talking with people who are more concerned about operating their business than they are about running social ad campaigns. What do you have to translate when you're moving from what you see on a screen or what your team is producing in reports to what you're telling your stakeholders?
Yeah, it's interesting you say it, because you would be surprised at the number of executives that still in 2024 hyperfixate on CAC and ROAS numbers and kind of miss the ways in which the world is evolving into this cookieless future. So we really try to speak with our clients and really the executives within our clients' accounts on the MER level to say like, yeah, this is the overall health of your business, and we'll still look as our secondary metric into a ROAS or a CAC depending on what they prioritize. But it is important to show them we can do all of these different things within a growth paid lean mindset and still drive efficiencies for your business. And so when we pivot into an MER landscape, what we need to be really careful of, especially when we manage some but not all of marketing channels for these brands, is that we aren't riding the coattails of organic social doing really well, SMS doing really well, what have you, right? Because that's where we really lose the engagement and really our ability to have a good relationship with our clients is if we're missing the bigger picture. I think a team member today was just saying that our year-over-year growth for a particular client is super, super strong. And I'm like, well, she's actively at a trade show right now. And it's possible that a couple of the sales she's been getting, even on her e-commerce site, are a symptom of wholesale just coming and making small orders for their team or what have you to try out the product longer. So those are things where we have to like catch ourselves and look back at the actual full e-commerce data, not just our lanes, and make sure we aren't falsely inflating the performance of what we've done as a symptom of other aspects of her business. And so those are examples where we really have to look beyond just paid to help identify what's happening for the client's business and be a good partner for them to figure out the right ways to grow.
Great point. And I can see it working either way. Perhaps you are the one who's providing those workhorse campaigns, and the other things that they're doing are riding the coattails. So it's good to have that conversation, whichever way it leads. It just brings us into, like you said, in 2024, what should be the level of transparency and candor that everybody has when they're looking at these numbers, right?
Exactly.
And if we're looking at the other things, so, you mentioned maybe awareness and how we have to drive the point home that just those direct response campaigns aren't the entire story. When it comes to the awareness piece, I imagine that things like influencers who are providing more content, more informational content about our brands, or maybe just alluding to the brand, but it's not the central character in the clip. These are ways that we're still having an impact, and yet we're not going to be able to use the same kind of numbers that a lower funnel campaign can use, and nor should we ever be judging those top of funnel campaigns by the same measures. Can you shed any light on that?
Yeah, and I think the influencer piece is interesting because obviously having partners and creators, educators who are going to say great things about your business is helpful on organic social. But the real special sauce in there is amplifying it as a spark or boosted ad. And it's in instances of both that sparking or just getting a bunch of influencers doing great work, where we really start to see that halo effect of like the sales are happening. Everybody in the industry knows influencer attribution and ROI on influencers is pretty much non-existent, but they're still doing it because they know it has this halo effect and surround sound for the business. And I think that's just, the murkiness that some of the awareness paid media is going to fall into in the future.
Yeah, we do have less, and we have to remember there's also things like cookie deprecation, and privacy is causing some data to be obscured from us, or at least agglomerated together. So yeah, you're right. We're going to have to, even though we have more data, in a way we are going to have to use our gut more too.
Yeah, and I was having a conversation with someone about this just the other day, like connected TV and audio ads, and so many of the lesser used and utilized for direct response channels are becoming more mainstay in month-over-month media mixes. And I think that that's really exciting because, for the past few years, only when brands found a bunch of incremental budget that they didn't know they had were we able to activate connected TV, because the rest of the time they were so focused on direct response.
There seems to be yet another way that we can test things out. Do you have any general guidance on how we test and maybe optimize when we've got different campaigns that could be looking at different outlets or that could be trying different individual ad content.
Yeah, I mean this gets cloudy really quickly, and I think this is where really working with the strategist and understanding what we're testing, making sure we're not testing too many things at once so that we don't get dirty data. And I think like whether it's a holdout test where you activate connected TV in one geo or something like that is going to be much more impactful than perhaps like loading up a handful of different tests at once where you really can't make sense of why there's strength in the e-commerce business right now. So I know that's not really the answer you were looking for, but I do think like strategically someone should be driving a really solid plan for how to test so that once the 2-week period, 30-day period is over, there is some real learnings from it. And I think oftentimes in digital, we're testing so much at once that if there isn't a good strategy at the top, no one really knows why something worked, where it worked, etc. So it gets really cloudy.
Yeah, I think the test over test plan that you're referring to actually saddles up very nicely with the fact that no piece of content is going to stay fresh forever. So we need to think about how we're only going to be able to use a certain piece of content. You mentioned the croquet example earlier. It's got a shelf life. So we might as well try to go intentionally with using it, but also have some testing going on so that we can perhaps figure out what we're going to use next and at least get directional data on what's going to work once this is no longer doing it for us.
Yep, exactly. And I would advise brands and marketers not to be afraid to go back and pull out their zombies. And I've been seeing a lot more of this. We've been
I
testing.
love that.
That's like the older assets that were evergreen that you pause down for
Yes.
one reason or another, push them back live. We do zombie campaigns on Google for Performance Max all the time. Like any SKU that's not getting enough light will push into its own campaign. It doesn't necessarily have to be a winner elsewhere, meaning it doesn't have to be like one of their top SKUs. It's just like if it didn't get the light of day in a more generalized campaign, let's give it some love.
Yeah. Everything old can be new again. We sometimes, when we're so close to it, we forget that audiences, I guess this brings us back to the fact that attention spans are short and the platforms do reinforce this. But in a way, when I hear you say zombie campaigns, it's like, well, we're using the platform, you know, that so-called, detraction from the platform to our advantage because it was only, 6 seconds of time that we gave that product exposure for, and that was months ago. So 6 seconds again today, we don't have any chance of fatiguing our audience. It's probably going to be welcome.
Exactly.
Man, you've clearly, got a lot of this under your belt, and I know that it was a passion about this that made you decide to restart an agency on this. Can you just tell us about how Pennock got started and why you felt so strongly that these kind of marketing campaigns and these kind of product categories needed what you're doing?
Yeah, sure. So my whole professional background has been e-commerce marketing, in-house and agency side. And as I moved up the ladder, a lot of what I was doing in-house was managing the agency. So I just felt I had a really well-rounded point of view on what a great relationship between a client and an agency should look like. And I really felt that I had a passion to help more than one brand at a time. And so, as you know, in the San Francisco Bay Area, as one layoff led to,
Right.
a child in my family, I was growing my family. I just decided to start my own marketing shop, and it's evolved very slowly but surely. We're very boutique in nature, and we're selective about the type of partners we help and the relationships we form. And it's really kind of those middle size brands that are trying to grow and scale to another figure at the, in their yearly mark. That is where we found our sweet spot.
Nice. And it sounds to me like you never run out of ideas for what you can try in this area. So, it's great that when you do make those partners You find those relationships that they can, burgeon into things that are going on for quite some time.
Exactly. I mean, in performance marketing, digital marketing, there's really not a dull week, right?
Right. They're going to turn around and something's going to be different.
Exactly.
If people want to reach out to you, Nikki, if they want to say hi, if they want to see some of the other tips that you put on other platforms, where would you send them?
Yeah, I mean, our website is still our hub for everything. So pennock.co is where you can find us. I am Nikki at pennock.co if you want to send me an email. We are pretty active on LinkedIn and on TikTok. Those are probably our two most active platforms as an agency. So those would be the places I would point people to.
Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, Glenn.
I'm really glad that I did. And there were a ton of things that you gave to our audience that they can put in place in their marketing to make it even better.
Thanks for listening. Follow the show on Twitter at Funnel Reboot. If you like what you have heard today, please consider leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts.